when I turned 18, it was basically the end of the 3K bottom. So I got some stacks in there.
You're in your first tour of duty, your first 4 years.
Yep. Still haven't. I still haven't completed it actually. So.
It's I find it super fascinating. I've been back into Bitcoin seriously for 5 years, but I would say I've been consciously on a Bitcoin standard for about 2 years now, both the podcast and personally. And when I say I'm in a Bitcoin standard, it doesn't mean I hold all my assets in Bitcoin. I am holding cash as well, like you, more so on the business side, less so personally, but I am holding cash. But I am making decisions based on understanding Bitcoin. So I mentioned I bought a house. And to my broker, I was very clear, I want the longest mortgage possible with the lowest deposit, with the longest possible low interest rate. So I think I've got a 5-year around 1.99% on a 25-year mortgage. So I've got a 5-year fix where I have to renegotiate. And I think the deposit's like, I can tell you, I'm just trying to figure it out. It's about 15%. That's the best I could get on that. Now I could have paid a higher deposit and a lower interest rate or changed but that was the best one. Because in my head, I'm like, if you're giving me a 5-year 1.99% interest rate, you're essentially giving me money.
Yeah.
And that's how I started to think. So I'm on that standard. I'm prepared for it. And what's really super interesting is I know Danny's on it. I know you're kind of on it. And I know all my friends in Bitcoin are kind of on that. But it's us in Bitcoin. And it's Michael Saylor. And it's a little bit of Tesla. But I feel like with everything that's happened this year, you just met Adam Curry. We were talking about with him. Danny's going to give me a really weird look. So just don't mention that interview with them. We're going to release them at different times. Sorry, everyone. But where was I going with that, Danny?
Bitcoin being part of every story.
Oh, yeah, Bitcoin being part of every fucking major story that happens right now. It doesn't matter what the story is. It's now this Bitcoin angle. Our podcast downloads are going insane. I feel like we're about to go through that next growth curve where we've gone past the nerds and the financially interested. We're just now getting into people who are like, I don't know why, but I know I need this shit.
Yeah, it's going to be part of the geopolitical discussion, and whether that's public or not. It's happening. Talked with Jason Lowery, and he said, he's talking with the FBI, CIA, and he said this on Twitter Space. I'm not like disclosing private information. Department of Defense, and they're not laughing at him. I mean, so like people are paying attention. Bitcoin is definitely part of the debate. It's obviously, the market's taken a hit since, the November all-time highs or whatever it is, but the volatility is nothing but a thing. And ultimately, I think the interest in the capital in Bitcoin, especially since like, the market's been kind of getting hit in 2022, I think there's some interesting bidders under the surface that maybe they're public, maybe they're not. But they're understanding this end game. If we see some sort of deleveraging event, if we see some broad-based liquidity crisis in the traditional financial markets, well, Bitcoin is still going to be probably around an order of magnitude larger than it was during the last huge crisis 2 years ago. So it's like, okay, what's the response going to be if we see any sort of kind of crash happen, right? And then people are going to say Bitcoin's not a store of value, it's dead, it's not an inflation hedge, yada yada, but it's still 5x, 10x, higher than it was at the bottom of March of 2020.
Dude, we're at 39,000. What are we saying, Shiv? 39,000.
2 years ago it was at 3,800 at the bottom. But
yeah.
And so it's like, okay, let's have some perspective here. And what's the response? Are they going to stop expanding the money supply?
Well, this is what people need to get their head around. And it comes back to time preference and patience and building up with your DCA, because you say, 2 years ago it was 3,800. When I bought my first Bitcoin, when I got back in, I can't remember, it was end of 16, start of 17. It was around that like December, January time. It was about $800 I bought a Bitcoin for. And I remember it going to 2,000 being like, fucking wild. And then it went to 20, came back down. Like, we know the end game for this. Like, this could drop back down, but we still know it's going higher.
Yeah.
And you just got to be able to play that long game and be patient, DCA in. In 4 years' time, do you think it's higher or lower than that?
Probably an order of magnitude higher.
Exactly.
The block clock might not have enough space.
Can it? It can't do six figures, can it?
It can adjust with It can say like million or whatever. You can put it in like different currencies, and it can say that. So
Well, you can-
NVK's got it figured out.
Has he?
Yeah.
I think he's just going to have to release a new one.
Just get longer and longer.
What was the first price you came in at? Ish.
When I turned 18, it was basically the end of the 3K bottom. So I got some stacks in there.
You were in your first tour of duty, your first 4 years.
Yep. Still haven't. I still haven't completed it actually. So
I always think for you first, you do a 4-year tour of duty. We're in our second one, aren't we, Dylan?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. That's all kind of fascinating. What are you monitoring with regards to like commodities as well? There's a show we want to make at one point discussing essentially commodity wars. So we had Lynn Alden, I mentioned on the show. We had it on a couple of months ago. We did a show called Currency Wars, talking about the future of currency wars. And then bang, a fucking war kicks off and we're essentially in a currency war. And we're in people are using the financial system as a weapon of war alongside bombs and propaganda. We've now got a financial war. And then we got it back on the other day to discuss like the reality of what's happening. But it feels like we're going into like commodity wars now. It's like, well, who controls what energy production where and what are the implications of that? How much of that are you tracking?
a good amount. I mean, first off, how great is Lynn Alden?
She is the fucking best.
Yeah, it's unreal. I mean, she was, and I should have paid more attention. She was a loud commodities bull. And, you know, obviously, like, who could have predicted a war, but...
Do you get a newsletter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A premium subscriber, no doubt.
$199 a year.
It's ridiculously cheap.
So I just interrupt. So I put that as a tweet a couple of years ago because people are fucking ragging on me for the show. And I was like, listen, there's 3 types of podcasts. There's a smart person, a moron and a smart person, and 2 morons. I said, my show is a moron and a smart person. I'm cool with that. But with Lynn Alden, that's our biggest spread.
Yeah, Lynn is fantastic. I mean... she's been documenting it out. I listened to Peter Zihan. He's an expert, kind of global macroeconomist. Definitely not going to say I'm some commodities expert, but I definitely follow it just to understand kind of the implications of what's happening. And part of the reason that, I guess notably like bearish on the legacy system and warning of somewhat of a liquidity crunch, deleveraging, is just looking at previous recession periods and what's happened leading up to that with energy prices, commodities. There's a real big impact on kind of the consumer balance sheet, on corporate margins, on just a slowdown in the economy in general. Last time we saw an energy prices rip like this was leading up to the Great Financial Crisis. And obviously there was kind of a contagion in subprime. But all of this kind of commodity shortage, right? Like the whole Russia-Ukraine thing, the implications of that are massive. Russia produces, off the top of my head, I think 15% of the world's natural gas, like 40% of that goes to Europe. I mean, what's the prices at the pump in where you live? Nuts.
Hold my fucking beer. People here like putting photographs up of $5, $6 a gallon. And I'm like, okay, let's do the maths. How many liters per gallon? We're paying this.
It's like 10.
$10. Yeah. Well, it's actually more now.
Yeah.
It's over $10. I mean, when I left, my car's usually... about £80 to fill up. When I left, it's the first time I ever went over 100. It was actually, I remember the number, it was £100 and 13 pence. I was like, fucking hell, I'm over like £100. And now when I get back, it's going to be like £120.
Yep.
It's fucking insane. And look, I don't mean to be a dick about this. Like, okay, I can afford to do it, but, and I'm not doing this as a flex or to look down on people, but I know there are people where this materially affects them, where they're going to have to make a decision. It's like, shit, can I afford to fill my car up? Do I now have to get a bus to work? Like this real, and we were speaking to Nick Carter, and Nick Carter said, humans flourish when commodity prices are low.
Yep.
For obvious reasons.
Yeah. And so, I mean, part of this, the crazy thing is, and why the, policymakers are so trapped is we're seeing broad-based inflation, but it's not really a result of monetary policy. I mean, I guess you could backtrack it and say it's a result of multiple decades of monetary policy. But right now, the inflation is because we have a commodity shortage, commodities across the board, energy, and now like the knockoff effects of, say, like natural gas, Russia's natural gas supply being cut off. Well, that happens to produce fertilizer. And so now we're going to see essentially food shortages all over the world in the 3rd, 4th quarter. Like, not meant to be dark, but this is just the reality that we're facing. And so it's basic supply and demand. What happens? Prices go up. There's going to be there's going to be not enough food. There's going to be not enough energy. People are going to have to cut back. And so a recession is not even really a result of like the financial conditions. It's a result of a shortage of real goods. And so when that happens, what's policymakers like with COVID say everybody got locked down. There was a demand shock or really a lack of demand, right? So they could throw a bunch of money at people. Oil went negative because there was like all the reserves were full, right? So they threw a bunch of money at people. It was relatively fine. You could buy your services, you could buy your goods. There was inflation, but there was such a lack of demand that you could make up for it. Well, the supply chains kind of got shattered because of that. And now economy's kind of heating up, going back into full swing. We throw this war in the mix, along with just the trillions of dollars that were printed. And now there's a huge shortage of all the stuff that we need. And throw like, Putin, I think, whether it's strategic or not, there's huge implications of the West just boycotting all of Russia's exports. They produce so many precious metals, they produce natural gas, energy. And so really we're looking at kind of a bleak outlook over the coming 6 to 12 months, maybe further. And maybe like a lot of Russia's oil supply, I think it's like 10 million barrels a day they supply the world. If that production goes offline, it's not like a Bitcoin miner where you can flip it back on. It's gone. And so it's not gone for the next year. It's gone for decades. And so there's some pretty big stuff happening behind the scenes. And so like, again, I'm no commodities expert. I'm not in this every day, but I've been watching the charts and it's like, my God, there's something's breaking. You see volatility across commodities, equities, credit markets, foreign exchange. It's, I think it's going to intensify. There's no happy ending here over the short term.